A massage therapist from Barling is facing new sexual assault charges after a third client came forward. 51-year-old Raymond Graham was arrested in September after two clients reported being assaulted during massages at Inner Peace Body Studio in Fort Smith. Well, now a third victim says Graham assaulted them in November of last year. Graham has pleaded not guilty and is now facing 3 felony charges and 2 civil lawsuits. His massage license has been suspended, and the studio is also facing legal action. The federal government shutdown continues after the Senate failed today to reach the necessary votes to pass a short-term spending measure. This is now the 8th failed attempt during the 14-day-long impasse. Over the weekend, President Trump posted that the administration had identified funds to pay troops if the shutdown continued. Today, DHS said the Coast Guard would also get paid, saying the money would come from tax and spending cuts passed by Congress over the summer. Meanwhile, Democrats are holding firm on their position of an extension of the Affordable Care Act subsidies. Leaders from both political parties continue to point the finger across the aisle.
We did not load up the temporary funding bill with any Republican priorities or partisan priorities at all. I don't have anything that I can take off of that document to make it more palatable for them. We're not playing games. They're playing a game. We're not. The strategy is to do the right and obvious thing and keep the government moving for the people.
The Democrat position will prevent health care costs from skyrocketing. If the shutdown reaches Friday, it will become the third longest in U.S. history. Concerns are growing here at home about what the shutdown could mean for SNAP benefits next month. 5 News reporter Lauren Spencer shows us why advocates say the impact could be serious for families across the state.
Everyone who's eligible for October benefits will receive those benefits. November is questionable depending on how long the shutdown goes.
Questionable. That's how the Arkansas Department of Human Services describes the outlook for SNAP benefits come November. Right now, more than 222,000 Arkansans rely on the program.
So SNAP becomes a really critical program to ensure that children and families, including seniors, veterans, people with disabilities, have access to critical food assistance to make sure that they're getting nutritious food for all of their meals.
Kristen Harper, Policy Director for Arkansas Advocates for Children and Families, says losing SNAP, even for a short time, would be a big deal for a state already struggling with hunger.
Arkansas is actually the most food insecure state in the nation. We have a food insecurity rate of 18.9% compared to 13.5% nationally.
DHS says if funding runs out, they'll encourage people to turn to local food pantries and programs, but advocates warn those resources could quickly be stretched thin.
We're going to see food banks potentially become overwhelmed with requests that they can't necessarily meet.
Harper says she's urging Arkansans to reach out to lawmakers to end the shutdown and protect programs that help families afford food and health care.
Many of the families who access SNAP, they have children in those families. Our SNAP program, they have very strict working requirements and things like that. So most people who are accessing SNAP are working.
Covering news where you live, Lauren Spencer, 5 News.
DHS stated between October of last year and August of this year, over 156,000 applications for SNAP benefits have been approved. And nonprofits are bearing some of the weight of the funding fight. Helping Hand of Greater Little Rock is an organization serving families on the historic Marshall Square District and beyond in Central Arkansas. Executive Director Margaret Douglas says because of the shutdown, they now have to cut back on donations, including rent and groceries. For many families, that means making tough choices.
They didn't have anything right now. You know how late it is when we got up here? It was about 10 o'clock, after 10 when we got here.
I have my seniors to call, and it's heartbreaking for me to I'm constantly saying no.
Douglas also explained she's worried the shutdown will impact how they donate around the holidays. Well, some late news headlines. The State Department says it has revoked visas from people who allegedly celebrated the murder of conservative activist Charlie Kirk. In a social media post, the State Department listed 6 people who had their visas revoked. They were from Argentina, South Africa, Paraguay, Mexico, Brazil, and Germany. It's unclear if the 6 are the only ones who had their visas revoked, and it comes on the same day President Trump posthumously awarded Kirk the nation's highest civilian award, the Presidential Medal of Freedom. A Pennsylvania man has pleaded guilty to firebombing the Pennsylvania governor's mansion in April. The arson attack happened while Governor Josh Shapiro and his family and guests were sleeping a few hours after they celebrated the Jewish holiday Passover. No one was hurt in the attack. Prosecutors say 38-year-old Cody Balmer scaled an iron security fence and used a sledgehammer to get through a window while throwing beer bottles filled with gasoline to set the house on fire. Balmer pleaded guilty to arson, terrorism, and attempted murder.
Just as a dad, the notion that doing the job that I love so much, that would put my kids' lives at risk, that would put my wife's life at risk, let alone my own, that's a hard thing to work through.
Under the plea deal, Balmer was sentenced to 25 to 50 years in prison, far less than he could have faced if the case had gone to trial. One day after President Trump's historic trip to the Middle East to mark a peace deal between Israel and Hamas, Hamas has yet to return the remains of 20 Israeli hostages who died in captivity. In an exclusive interview with CBS News, Israeli President Benjamin Netanyahu says peace in the region is dependent upon Hamas upholding its end of the agreement.
Less than 24 hours after his historic trip to the Middle East touting a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas, President Trump expressed frustration Tuesday with Hamas resisting part of his proposed peace plan.
Well, they're going to disarm, and because they said they were going to disarm. And if they don't disarm, we will disarm them.
The president also pushed for the return of the remains of Israeli hostages who died in Hamas captivity.
I want them back. That's what they said. I want them back.
In an interview with CBS News' Tony DeCopel, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said a lasting peace in the region is dependent upon Hamas fulfilling its end of the agreement.
First, Hamas has to give up its arms. And second, you want to make sure that there are no weapons factories inside Gaza. There's no smuggling of weapons into Gaza. That's demilitarization. We agreed that that's part of the plan. And we also agreed, okay, let's get the first part done. And now let's give a chance to do the second part peacefully, which is my hope.
The remains of 8 Israeli hostages have been turned over to Israel since the peace deal went into effect, but the remains of 20 additional hostages have yet to be returned. And Hamas says locating some of the remains has been difficult. On Tuesday, Israel said it would cut in half the number of aid trucks it is allowing to go into Gaza because of the delay in the return of deceased hostages. For now, Palestinians continue to return to their homes, many of them in ruins, as some aid trucks arrive with long-awaited food and other critical supplies. Erica Brown, CBS News, Washington.